In 2024, Michiganders will head to the polls to cast their vote for U.S. Senate. And for the first time since 2000, Democrat Debbie Stabenow will not be on the ballot. The incumbent senator announced earlier this year that she will retire at the end of her fourth term.
Now, since the announcement, two Republicans have entered the race, Nikki Snyder as well as Michael Hoover, as well as Democratic businessman Nasser Beydoun, U.S. Representative Alyssa Slotkin, and attorney Zach Burns, all of whom have joined us right here on CBS News Detroit at 5.
And joining us now is Leslie Love, a former Democratic state representative from Detroit, now the Assistant Deputy Director of MDOT's Metro Region. Leslie, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And so why are you so excited about running for this position, running for Senate?
Well, listen, I think it's very important and everyone should know that representation matters. You know, we want to make sure that we have people who, a leader, a senator that is from the people, elected by the people, who's for the people. And I was a state representative for 4 years, and during the most turbulent times in recent Michigan history, and I got results for Michiganders. And I want to continue that work and to help the people of this state in Washington, D.C.
What do you think you can do with a statewide office, federal office like the U.S. Senate, that maybe you couldn't do with a local office when you were in the state, when you were a state representative?
I'm glad you asked me that, because one of the main things that made me want to do this is the attention to nursing homes. My mother was in a nursing home, but she still is. And I lived that experience with her and got to see the good and the bad of that. And so one of my special pet projects that I would like to really make a difference on is to have comprehensive reform around nursing home care. When we grow old and age into our senior years, and if we should need that extra care, it's very important that we have quality care services and we take care of those people who take care of our loved ones too. So that's one of my top priorities. And because of it's Medicaid, Medicare funded, it's very important that we do that at the federal level.
We saw so many issues, of course, during the pandemic with everything going on in nursing homes. As far as the debt ceiling, that has been a big topic of conversation going on nationally. How do you plan to attack that situation?
Yeah, well, that's the situation that they have to address today. And so I'm not there yet. But when we face those things, we have to use due diligence. And we want to make sure that our government continues to work for us. So just being very involved in that process and understanding what's happening at the time. So if that happens when I'm elected, we'll be able to make some decisions and hopefully promote us keeping our economy going and keeping our government working. And so that's what I would do.
Michigan has recently passed some gun legislation, firearm legislation. Seems like it's a more difficult conversation to have in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. What is your stance on firearms legislation?
Right. You know, it's what we've seen lately happening with gun violence, domestic violence, is obscene. And it's a system of mental illness. I know, and I'm a gun owner myself, I know a lot of people who own firearms, and they are responsible firearm owners. When we see these egregious incidents in our schools being shot up and churches, that is so obnoxious and obscene. And I do believe we need sensible gun reform around that, but also not to penalize, have unintended consequences and penalize those folks that we don't mean to in our attempts to address a mental health crisis that's happening in our nation. And we really need to do things that are preventative and look at this as it's really unique to America that we have this type of reaction when we are angry, and that's unacceptable. We never want to hear another story reported from your news desk about this. And so I'm very supportive of sensible reforms around that, but also respectful of gun owners who absolutely are responsible and held human life very sacred.
We can hear how passionate you are about this topic, and what do you say to somebody that says, no, everything's fine, you're trying to take away guns? And we've heard the opposition so many times say what they say.
Clearly everything is not fine. We have a problem in America with guns. And so, and most people who don't take life or have a reverence for human life. And I think that's really at the core of this. Like what sets a person off to think that my answer to my problem is to shoot up a classroom full of kindergartners? That's insane, and it hurts us to the heart, to the core. That's not America. That's not humanity. That's not our values. And so we have to make sure we have assistance and programs in mental health so that we never get to a point where someone feels like that's their only answer.
Whether we are talking gun rights or even reproductive rights, how do you think you will be able to work across the aisle? Do you think it's possible to do that in the Senate, the U.S. Senate as it currently stands?
Well, I'll have you know, when I was a state legislator, I worked across the aisle, across the chambers, and I got results for Michiganders. And that's what I think is unique about me. I've introduced bipartisan legislation, and not only policy, but I've moved money, funds, and brought them to my district and to other areas across the state of Michigan that were impactful and important to our causes and what we say are important in Michigan. So I think that speaks, my reputation, my commitment to the people speaks to the fact that I can work bipartisanly, and I think it's required. People want to see their elected officials act in civility, but not be a sellout.
Well, Leslie Love, Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Best of luck with your campaign.
All right.
And you can watch all of the interviews with the candidates. They can be found on our website, cbsdetroit.com.